Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, welcome to Hidden Human Story Radio with your host, Rita Jean Moran. Today is Thursday, July 25th, 2013, and I'm your host, Rita Jean Moran. The last few shows that I've done have revealed an ancient past that has been hidden. No one has put this together like I have. My research is completely original, and it took me years to figure this out and find some proof to prove my theory. In the past few shows, we've talked about the ancient Greek gods and goddesses who were real people, and per my calculations and estimates, existed around 16,000 to 17,000 years ago. I talked about the wars that they had, and the final winner being the god known as Zeus. I talked about the inbreeding that was deliberately done with his bloodline. I talked about the Titans and their loss. I've revealed that the Abrahamic god was known as Jupiter Sabazios, another name for Zeus. I've read you some of the works from the Greek and Roman scholars. I've told you that Dionysus Osiris traveled the world with his family and an army and civilized it, and several books have been written about his global travels. Now it's time to look at some of the other mythologies from around the world. Tonight, I'll be talking about the Suean legends of Redhorn and White Buffalo Woman. But before I do that, I want to talk about the timeline of these people that is somewhat indicated by the Egyptian scholar named Manetho and a papyrus known as the Turin Papyrus. Now, there's several other kings lists, namely the Sumerian, there's Indian kings list, and recent king lists from Ireland and Spain and France. But some of the very older kings lists are the Sumerian and this Manetho. And the timeline in the Sumerian is in hundreds of thousands of years per the interpretation of the ancient writings. I kind of don't go along with that. The Manetho timeline is in thousands of years. Now, okay. Now, the Turin Kings List is also known as the Turin Royal Canon, and it lists the reigns of gods of old and kings from ancient Egypt. The chronology of the pharaohs of Egypt is listed for the dynasties before Ramses II. The list lists the names of the rulers and their length of reign in years, months, and days. The timing of these reigns corresponds to the Manetho list. The papyrus was found by the Italian traveler Bernardino Drovetti in 1820 at Luxor and is now sitting in the Egyptian Museum in Turin, Italy. Okay, Manetho was an Egyptian scholar, and he wrote a book called Egyptica. And I'm going to read a little bit from it, and then we'll talk about the timing that he gives. The first man, or god, in Egypt is Hephaestus, who is also renowned among the Egyptians as the discoverer of fire. His son, Helios, the sun, was succeeded by Sosis. Then follow in turn Cronus, Osiris, Typhon, brother of Osiris, and lastly Horus, son of Osiris and Isis. They were the first to hold sway in Egypt. Therefore, the kingship passed from one to another in unbroken succession down to Bitus through 13,900 years. The year I take, however, to be a lunar one, consisting, that is, of 30 days. What we now call a month, the Egyptians used formerly to style a year. After the gods, demigods reigned for 1,255 years, and again Another line of kings held sway for 1,817 years. Then came 30 more kings of Memphis, reigning for 1,790 years, and then again 10 kings of This, reigning for 350 years. There followed the rule of spirits of the dead and demigods for 5,813 years. The total of the last 5 groups amounts to 11,000 years. These, however, being lunar periods or months. But in truth, the whole rule of which the Egyptians tell, the rule of the gods, demigods, and spirits of the dead, is reckoned to have comprised in all 24,000 lunar years, which make 2,206 solar years. Now, if you care to compare these figures with Hebrew chronology, you will find that they are in perfect harmony. Egypt is called Mizraim by the Hebrews, and Mizraim lived long after the flood. For after the flood, Cham, or Ham, son of Noah, begat Egyptus, or Mizraim, who was the first to set out to establish himself in Egypt, at that time when the tribes began to disperse this way and that. Now the whole time from Adam to the flood was, according to the Hebrews, 2,242 years. But since the Egyptians claim by a sort of prerogative of antiquity that they have, before the flood, a line of gods, demigods, and spirits of the dead who reigned for more than 20,000 years, it clearly follows that these years should be reckoned as the same number of months as the years recorded by the Hebrews. That is, that all the months contained in the Hebrew record of years should be reckoned so as many lunar years of the Egyptian calculation, in accordance with the total length of time reckoned from the creation of man in the beginning down to Mizraim. Okay, but if the number of years is still in excess, it must be supposed that perhaps several Egyptian kings ruled at one and the same time, for they say that the rulers were kings of This, of Memphis, of Sai, of Ethiopia, and other places at the same time. It seems, moreover, that different kings held sway in different regions, and that each dynasty was confined to its own nome. Thus, it was not a succession of kings occupying the throne, one after the other, but several kings reigning at the same time in different regions. Hence arose the great total number of years. But let us leave this question and take up in detail the chronology of Egyptian history. Thereafter, Manetho tells also of 5 Egyptian tribes which formed 30 dynasties, comprising those whom they call gods, demigods, spirits of the dead, and mortal men. Of these, Eusebius, son of Pamphilus, gives the following account of his Chronica. Concerning gods, demigods, spirits of the dead, and mortal kings, the Egyptians have a long series of foolish myths. The most ancient Egyptian kings, indeed, alleged that their years were lunar years consisting of 30 days, whereas the demigods who succeeded them gave the name Horai to years, which were 3 months long. So Eusebius wrote, with good reason, criticizing the Egyptians for their foolish talk, and in my opinion, Panodorus is wrong in finding fault with Eusebius here, on the ground that Eusebius failed to explain the meaning of the historians, while Panodorus thinks he himself succeeds by a somewhat novel method as follows. From the creation of Adam, indeed, down to Enoch, the general cosmic year, 1,282, the number of days, was known in neither month nor year, but the egregori, or watchers, who had descended to earth in the general cosmic year 1000, held converse with men and taught them that the orbits of the 2 luminaries, being marked by the 12 signs of the zodiac, one composed of 360 parts. Observing the moon's orbits, which is nearer the earth, smaller and more conspicuous, as it has a period of 30 days, men decided that it should be reckoned as a year, since the orbit of the sun also was filled by the same 12 signs of the zodiac, with an equal number of parts, 360. So it came to pass that the reigns of the gods who ruled among them for 6 generations in 6 dynasties were reckoned in years, each consisting of lunar cycles or 30 days. The total in lunar years is 11,985 or 969 solar years. By adding these to the 1,058 solar year period before their reign, they reach the sum total of 2,027 years. Similarly, in the two dynasties of 9 demigods, these being regarded as real, although they never existed, Panodorus strives to make up 214.5 years out of 858 hori, or periods of 3 months. So that with 969 years, they make, he says, 1,183.5 years. And these were added to the 1,058 years from the time of Adam to the reign of the gods, complete a total of 2,242 years down to the flood. Okay, so this continues on, and there's a lot of discussion of the timing of how long these beings lasted. And there is a Hephaestus listed as 9,000 years. And if that's, lunar months, you have a total of 727 and 3/4 years that the guy reigned. And that's still quite a bit. However, there are several mythologies that state that humans lived or these beings lived for long periods of time. Some of the other figures are Kronos. Well, let me back it up a minute. Hephaestus, 727 years. Helios, 80 years. Agatha Daimon, 56 years. Kronos, which is probably another name for Zeus, 40 years. Although there is a Kronos the father, but this one looks like it's for Zeus. Osiris and Isis, 35 years. Typhon for 29 years. And then the demigods, Horus for 25 years, which sounds like Horus. Ares for 23 years. Anubis for 17 years. Heracles for 15. Apollo for 25. Ammon for 30. And Tithys for 27. And Sosus for 32. And Zeus for 20. Now, the other thought that was mentioned was this was their rule at the same time, and it's just giving how long they all ruled in different areas, and that's a possibility as well. In this book, there are various determinations of the time period from different accounts. There's an Africanus account and several other accounts, and they all vary in what their timing is. So we know from modern-day anthropologists that there's a certain number of dynasties in Egypt, and those go back about 5,200 or 5,200 years ago from today. And prior to that, there was a rule of spirits of the dead and the demigods, and then the kings of Thys, and then the kings of Memphis, and then another line of kings, and then these gods. So we're not quite sure if these years were given in solar or lunar, and like I said, there are stories of humans or these beings living for long lives. We're not quite sure if this is linear rulage, although it appears to be. If I was to take these as lunar, I still get quite a bit of time added up when I start to take, 5,200 years back and then some of their solar years, and, I'm over 10,000 years ago. As I mentioned in some of the previous shows, Diodorus Siculus, in his Library of History, stated that the time of Osiris and Isis was ranging from anywhere from 10,000 to 23,000 years before the reign of Alexander. And Alexander the Great lived from 356 to 323 BC. So if we add about 2,300 years, we're looking at about over 12,000 to 25,000 years ago per the writings of Diodorus Siculus that Osiris and Isis were ruling and living. I'm estimating anywhere between 16,000 and 17,000 years ago. I am going to be doing a lot more research on this, looking at some different sources. I tend to probably figure it is somewhere between this 10,000 or rather 12,000 and 25,000 years ago. So that is where some of the timing is determined. However, you can see Manetho was influenced by Judaism and was trying to make his numbers fit with that story, but could not. So he didn't fully believe it, but we need to look at independent sources from that to start really seeing what has gone on this planet. Now, the last pharaoh of Egypt was Caesarion, and he was born to Caesar and the last Cleopatra, and he was born on June 23rd, 47 BC, around the summer solstice. He was allegedly murdered by Octavius on August 23rd, 30 BC, at the age of 17. He reigned with his mother jointly from September 2nd, 44 BC, to his alleged death. Caesarion lived in Rome for 2 years of his life and returned back to Egypt with his mother after Caesar was assassinated on March 15th, 44 BC, known as the Ides of March. Now, there are some claims that Caesarion escaped to India and was not killed. There's no body that has been found for Caesarion or any indication of his grave. Octavian took over the rulership of Egypt and Rome in 30 BC. The Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar that we use today are based on the beginning of Caesarion's reign. It was designed for him under commission of his father, Julius Caesar, and his rulership began on September 2nd. Julius Caesar reformed the Roman calendar in 46 BC, and it had a regular year of 365 days divided into 12 months. A leap day was added in February every 4 years. The Gregorian calendar was added to change the Julian calendar to compensate with differences between it and the tropical solar year. It is also interesting to note that January 1st was not always the start of the new year in this calendar system. It was around September 1st. And September 11th in the Coptic calendar is the new year for the Alexandrian calendar. And it's based on the old Egyptian calendar. Okay, September 11th, 9/11. Okay. It is still used by the Coptic Church today. It appears that there is a 44-year difference between today's calendar start date and the year 1 BC or 1 AD, because there's no 0 year, and the start of Caesarion's rule. However, I have to wonder if this is a mistake done on purpose to hide the true identity of the last pharaoh, Caesarion, because we do have this break in that calendar from BC to AD, which has to do with Jesus Christ's birth. I believe the identity of Caesarion, who he was after he was supposedly killed, has definitely been hidden. And there is a possibility that Jesus Christ might have been Caesarion, and that calendar system was deliberately changed around so you wouldn't put it together. Now, there are stories of a tomb in Rosabelle that's supposed to be, and that's in Kashmir, that is supposed to be a tomb of Jesus Christ after his crucifixion. And there are some slabs with his feet with crucifixion marks in it, in that tomb, and they pretty much have closed it off because there have been some researchers wanting to exhume the body and do some research on it and get some DNA tests, and probably can do some kind of x-rays if there's any bones left to see if there was any kind of crucifixion marks on them. But that tomb has basically been closed off, although it used to be a popular place for Indian Christians to do pilgrimages at. Now, that's a subject for a whole other show. It's very controversial, and I will get into that possibly in another show. So let's move on to some of the stories of the Sioux people of North America. Well, I want to get into a lot of these stories of a giant red-haired race that was globally present. And there are stories in every mythology about this race. Now, the writings of Plutarch, Nonus, and Diodorus Siculus include a story about Dionysus Osiris going around the world after he civilized Egypt, teaching the people farming and animal husbandry and civilization before he was killed. The Sioux story of Earthmaker giving hair holy rites, which is medicine lodge used on certain days, to give to the people, comes from Ho-Chunk stories. And it talks about hair receiving rights from a higher god to benefit the people. Now, this is similar to the story of Osiris and or Zeus going around the world teaching humans the arts of civilization. So here you have stories on both sides of the globe of a being or group of beings who taught rites or mysteries to benefit the people. Now, there are other stories as well, all over the world, including the Mesoamerican stories of Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, Votan, and other similar gods, giving their ancestors the knowledge of civilization and sacred rites. Now, according to Wikipedia, Red Horn is a culture hero in Sioux oral traditions, specifically of the Iowa and Hokaak, Winnebago nations. Winnebago is a word they use for Ho-Chunk. They don't prefer that term. It was given to them. They prefer to be called Ho-Chunk. Only in Hokaak literature is he known as Red Horn. But among the Iowa and Hokakara both, he is also known by one of his variant names, he who wears faces in his ears. The name derives from the living faces on his earlobes, or earbobs, that come to life when he places them on his ears. Elsewhere he is given yet another name, Red Man, on account of the fact that his entire body is red from head to toe. Red Horn was one of the 5 sons of Earthmaker, whom the Creator fashioned with his own hands and sent to Earth to rescue mankind. During his sojourn on Earth, he contested both giants and water spirits, and led war parties against the bad spirits who plagued mankind. As wears faces on his ears, he is also said to be a star, although its identity is a subject of controversy. Under the names One Horn and Without Horns, he and his sons are chiefs over the Lilliputian hunting spirits known as the Hiraka and the Little Children spirits. Red Horn, as chief of the Hiraka, has a spiritual and sometimes corporal identity with the arrow. Archaeologists have speculated that Redhorn is a mythic figure in Mississippian art represented on a number of southeastern ceremonial complex artifacts. According to legend, Redhorn is one of the 5 great soteriological spirits fashioned by the Creator's own hands, sent to Earth to make the world safe for the least endowed of Earthmaker's creation, the 2-legged walkers. The first spirit to be sent down to Earth to help mankind was Trickster, whose foolishness made it necessary to recall him. Earthmaker next sent down Bladder, whose arrogance led to the loss of all but one of his 20 brothers, so he too was recalled. Then Earthmaker made Turtle and charged him to teach the humans how to live, but Turtle brought them war and was in turn recalled. The 5th and the last of these heroes dispatched by Earthmaker was Hare, who conquered all the bad spirits who had preyed on humanity. By accident, however, he introduced death, but made up for it by creating the Medicine Lodge, by whose discipline members could achieve immortality. Earthmaker made Hare in charge of the earth. Okay, that sounds like Zeus. And to each of the other 3 spirits, he gave an otherworldly paradise to govern. The penultimate savior figure in this series was Redhorn. He had quite nearly succeeded, but was killed in a wrestling match with the enemies of the human race. Although later revived, he too was recalled, although the reasons for his failure are obscure. One source suggests that it was lack of gravitas. Okay, that sounds like Osiris, that he was, killed and revived. Then Earthmaker sent down another son, he who wears human heads as earrings. He went around talking to people, but they would always fix on his earrings, which were actual living miniature human heads. When these little heads saw someone looking at them, they would wink and make funny faces. In the end, he who wears human heads as earrings could not accomplish the mission either. Okay, further information on Redhorn from Wikipedia is as follows. The adventures of Redhorn are set out in a set of stories known as the Redhorn Cycle. The Redhorn Cycle depicts his adventures with Turtle, a thunderbird, Storms as he walks, and others who contest a race of giants or man-eaters who have been killing human beings from whom Redhorn has pledged to help. Okay, and in my previous stories, he was there. Osiris Dionysus was traveling the world to end cannibalism, as I've read out in my previous shows. This is the same thing. Okay. In the episode associated with this name, Redhorn turns himself into an arrow to win a race. After winning the race, Redhorn creates heads on his earlobes and makes his hair into a long red braid called a he-horn, or a hay, or horn, in Hokkak. Thus he becomes known as Redhorn, and as he who wears faces on his ears. Okay. Here they're basically telling you the guy had red hair, and he put it in a ponytail that they called a horn. So he was a red-haired being. In one episode, an orphan girl who always wears a white beaver skin wrap is pressured by her grandmother to court Redhorn. Despite the girl's adamant refusal, the grandmother insists. She eventually relents and goes off to find Redhorn, who is surrounded by other girls. She teases him, and unexpectedly, he smiles at her. The other girls were jealous. They push and shove her and tell her, "You don't know anything." Redhorn and his friends prepare to go on the warpath and are camped just outside the village. During this time, the women bring the warriors moccasins, and she brings a pair to Redhorn, who accepts them. When the warriors return from the battle, they play a prank and have the sentries proclaim that Redhorn and one of his friends are dead. The grandmother begins to cut the hair of the orphan girl, as if she were already Redhorn's wife. When he comes into view, and it is apparent that he is not dead, the grandmother laments, "I have wrecked my granddaughter's hair." The visitors dance for 4 days, and many of the young men approach Redhorn to recommend their sisters to him. He takes no interest and asks instead, "Where does the girl in the white beaverskin wrap live?" At night, Redhorn shows up at the girl's lodge and lies down next to her. Her grandmother throws a blanket over them, and they are married. In another episode, with their lives staked on the outcome, the giants challenge Redhorn and his friends to play keesick or lacrosse. The best giant player was a woman with long red hair, just like Redhorn's. Because you have two different tribes here being described. The ancestors of these Ho-Chunk people and these red-haired giants. And the red-haired Redhorn was helping out the ancestors of the Ho-Chunk. So let's continue. The little heads on Redhorn's ears caused her to laugh so much that it interfered with her game, and the giants lost. But Redhorn married the girl with the red hair. The giants lost all their other contests as well. Then they challenged Redhorn and his friends to a wrestling match in which they threw all but Redhorn's friend, Turtle. Since Redhorn and his fellow spirits lost 2 out of 3 matches, they were all slain. Now, there is a ball game down in Mesoamerica, an ancient game that they would play for days of trying to get this ball in a little hole, and the losing team was killed as well. So that sounds very similar to this ancient lacrosse game. Now here's a little bit more from Wikipedia. The 2 wives of Redhorn were pregnant at the same time of death. Redhorn's first wife, the girl in the white beaverskin wrap, gave birth to a son who had the same red hair and human heads hanging from his ears as his father. Redhorn's second wife, the giantess, also gave birth to a red-haired boy. Okay, but with living faces where his nipples should have been. Interesting. The sons were spared by the giants and grew up to be very large. One day the eldest son went out to fast in order to get a blessing from the thunderbirds. He went to seek his visions at a place not far from a broad prairie where the giants had a village. Okay, so here it's telling you that there were giants in North America. At the same time, there were ancestors of the Ho-Chunk or Siouan people, and they were at war with each other. And this Redhorn character, married a wife from each tribe, and that kind of helped them get along a little bit better. He knew that the head of his father, whose hair had by now turned white, hung from a lodge pole there. When he called out to the spirits with a death song, the kind sung by prisoners about to be executed, the giants who heard it would immediately jump into the fire. When the old men of the village saw that so many of their people were jumping into the flames, they guessed at the cause and ordered 4 warriors to guard the scalp pole. 2 of the guards painted themselves red and others painted themselves black. Redhorn's 2 sons decided then to retrieve the heads of their father and his friends. They used their powers to make special red and black arrows to kill the guards and grabbed the heads and ran with them. As the boys ran, they shot the giants with the arrows, each arrow killing many giants. When they ran out of arrows, they used their bows as clubs, almost wiping out the giants completely. A little girl with a boy that she packed on her back are spared so that the race of giants do not become extinct, but they are thrown to the other side of the sea, so then will no longer be a threat. The 2 sons then burn the bodies of the giants and grind up their bones and spread the powder around their own village. Okay, so interesting that they were destroying the evidence of this other people. Okay, so the 2 sons take the head of Redhorn and ask their mothers to sleep with it, but each replies, "How can I sleep with that? It is only a skull." The boys take all 3 heads and lay them in a bed in the middle of the lodge. The next day, Redhorn, Turtle, and Storms as he walks are all found alive and sleeping in the bed where the sons had scattered the powdered bones of the giants. All the people that the giants had killed were also found alive and sleeping. Okay, I don't believe that, but that's what the mythology says. When Redhorn's wives saw this, they shouted, "Oh, our sons have brought our husbands back to life again." The boys picked up their fathers and carried them around like children. I think this is just some kind of a ritual to believe that they were alive, but I think they weren't. In honor of this feat, Turtle and Storms, as he walks, promised the boys special weapons. In another episode, the sons of Redhorn decide to go on the warpath. The older brother asks Storms as he walks for the Thunderbird war bundle. After some effort, it is produced. But the Thunderbirds demand that it have a case. A friend of the sons of Redhorn offers his own body as its case. The boys take the Thunderbird war bundle with their followers, go on a raid to the other side of the sky. Okay. Now, Redhorn, like I said, had red hair pulled back in a ponytail. And that is a characteristic of the Caucasoid race. Period. Okay, now we have mention of cannibalistic giants on both sides of the globe, and there are basically this story is telling you that giants existed at the same time as the ancestors of these Ho-Chunk people, and they were sometimes, getting along, and other times not, but these giants apparently were attacked and pretty much exterminated. Okay, now there's other legends associated with, and that would be up in Wisconsin. That's one of the areas where the Ho-Chunk are right now. Now, there are other legends associating Redhorn with a star. Oftentimes, I believe it is Orion or Sirius. Now, he is probably also the source behind the Birdman cult that exists throughout all of the Mississippian people's mythologies, and some in the Polynesian area as well. You could take that also down into Mesoamerica and South America with the feathered serpent mythology. There have been 2 main caves discovered with pictographs about Redhorn. And one is in Wisconsin, and I did try and get in there to see if I can go up and do some research. Unfortunately, it was vandalized in the past, and it's been shut down and closed. And the Ho-Chunk have claimed it, or are working. Basically, they're working with another group up in Wisconsin to control it and protect it and close it down. There are supposed to be over 40 pictographs in that cave. They're not taking all of the pictures of the pictographs and presenting it to the public, which I am not really happy with, because what are we hiding? And what are we hiding? That they don't want people to know what is in those pictographs. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more in a minute. Let me read a little bit from Wikipedia about the Gotchel site. That's the site that I'm talking about up in Wisconsin. Gotchel Rock Shelter, a horizontally shallow cave located in Moscato, Wisconsin, contains about 40 pictographs. Robert J. Salzer began to excavate the site in 1982, 8 years after it had been rediscovered. He identified panel 5 to be of special interest since it is a composition containing several figures that seem to be engaged in a single action. Panel 5 is dated with a good measure of confidence to the 10th century A.D. At the outset, Robert L. Hall, the leader in the field, pointed out to Salzer that one of the figures in panel 5 appeared to have attributes associated with the Redhorn mythology. The character in figure 4 has a pattern around each nipple, which resembles the long-nosed god Maskets. That would be your Birdman cult. Okay, the face of the Maskets are of the same outline as that found around each nipple on the pictograph. I first interpreted the two parallel lines above the face outline as the red horn. I now feel that they represent the long nose of the long-nosed god in a face-on perspective, which the artist could not quite handle. That leaves the nipples for the mouth and tongue. And remember that the little faces stuck out their tongues when manipulated. The stone big boy pipe from the sparrow had long-nosed god mascots on each ear. And I would guess that this is what Redhorn also wore on his ears, and was the reason he was called he who wears human heads as earrings. Salazar identified the other figures as being two giants. Interesting. One of whom was the woman that eventually married Redhorn, and other pictographs seem to be of Turtle and Storms as he walks, all of whom had gathered together on the occasion of the great lacrosse game between the good spirits and the giants. Salazar believes, contrary to Hall, that the figure to be far right is not a son of Redhorn, but Redhorn himself. The reason why we do not see prosopic earpieces is that part of the tail of the bird in the center of the panel has been painted over Redhorn's ears. Most archaeologists have accepted the idea that the panel is devoted to Redhorn mythology, although a few others have been highly skeptical. Okay, the second cave with the Redhorn pictographs is Picture Cave in Missouri. Let me read a little bit here about Picture Cave from Wikipedia. In Warren County, Missouri, there is a site appropriately styled Picture Cave. As its name suggests, it contains a wealth of pictographs, including one that has been identified with the Hotkak spirit red horn. Other pictographs in Picture Cave have been dated from about 915 AD to 1066 AD. Although the age of the red horn pictograph has so far not been determined, it differs stylistically from the other pictographs in the cave and has a patina of silica, which may suggest that it is older than the others. Almost solely on the basis of the prosopic earpiece, Duncan connects the main character of the scene with Redhorn. He describes the chief figure in the panel as Morning Star, known by the Winnebago, or Ho-Chunk, as Redhorn, an identification which has now become universal among archaeologists. He also believes that the Redhorn of Picture Cave is carrying the head of Morning Star, which he describes as an act of self-resurrection. Okay, Osiris is the resurrected god. Nevertheless, at one point, Duncan says, with respect to Redhorn pictograph, this early Braden-style rendering conforms to the description of he who wears human heads as earrings, or Redhorn, after he wrestled with the giants. Redhorn's head is described as being carried by one of his sons. This is an unmistakable scene in Picture Cave that is finely and delicately rendered and includes a substantial use of white pigment. Okay, now as I said, the Birdman cult is prevalent amongst the ancient Mississippian people, some of the Polynesian people, and it's probably the same thing as the feathered serpent among the Mesoamerican and South American people. Now, I did go out and get the book by Robert Salzer and Grace Rajnovic about the Gotchal Rock Shelter. It has a little bit of some of the pictures of some of the pictographs. There is a pictograph of a pipe smoker, and that pipe smoker appears to have a full beard. Okay? And that is a typical Caucasian trait, not often seen amongst those that are called Native American. So what else is in that cave? Now, there's supposed to be 40 of these pictographs, and we're only seeing a few of them in this book, and now it's closed off. And, it was closed off because some fool went in there with a chainsaw and tried to cut out part of the pictograph and was unsuccessful. that's one of the reasons. It was the red horn pictograph they tried to cut out with a chainsaw. So when fools like that do that, they wreck it for everybody else to know what the truth is. And maybe it was done on purpose. Maybe it was done on purpose. But that cave is closed, not open to the public, and there won't be any kind of information about all of the pictographs that are in there and why one of them appears to have a full beard and why their stories talk about Redhorn having red hair and marrying a giantess with red hair and marrying one of their people and having sons with red hair and traveling with two other people like himself, very similar to Osiris Dionysus traveling with his brothers Apollo and Hermes and his wife Ariadne, and probably with his father. Okay, I believe without a doubt that hair is Zeus and Redhorn is Dionysus Osiris. Now, let's take a look at the White Buffalo Woman's story. According to Wikipedia, the traditional story is that long ago there was a time of famine. The chief of the Lakotas sent out 2 scouts to hunt for food. As the young men traveled, they saw a figure in the distance. As they approached, they saw that it was a beautiful young woman in white clothing. One of the men was filled with desire for the woman. He approached her, telling her companion he would attempt to embrace the woman. They'll probably rape her. And if he found her pleasing, he would claim her as a wife. His companion warned him that she appeared to be a sacred woman, and to do anything sacrilegious would be folly. The man ignored the other's advice. The companion watched as the other approached and embraced the woman, during which time a white cloud enveloped the pair. After a while, the cloud disappeared, and only the mysterious woman and a pile of bones remained. The remaining man was frightened and began to draw his bow. But the woman beckoned him forward, telling him that no harm would come to him. As the woman spoke Lakota, the young man decided she was one of his people and came forward. When he arrived, she pointed to a spot on the ground where the other scouts' bare bones lay. She explained that the crazy buffalo had compelled the man to desire her, and she had annihilated him. The man became even more frightened and again menaced her with his bow. At that time, the woman explained that she was Wakin, or holy, and his weapons could not harm her. She further explained that if he did as he was instructed, no harm would befall him, and that his tribe would become prosperous. The scout promised to do what she instructed, and was told to return to his encampment, call the council, and prepare a feast for her arrival. The woman's name was Setsanwi, which translated White Buffalo Calf Woman. She taught the Lakotas 7 sacred rituals and gave them the Chanupa, or sacred pipe, which is the holiest of all worship symbols. After teaching the people and giving them her gifts, Setsanwi left them, promising to return. Later, the story became attributed to the goddess Wopi, also known as Wopi or Wop. When Roman Catholic missionaries that's a problem. When Roman Catholic missionaries first came among the Lakota, their stories of the Virgin Mary and Jesus became associated with the legend of White Buffalo Calf Woman. The syncretic practice of identifying Mary with Setsanwi and Jesus with the Chanupa continues among Lakota Christians to this day. The story of Setsanwi is associated with the White Buffalo. Now, I was able to go up and see the white buffalo known as Miracle in Wisconsin in the 1990s before she died. And it was after she had changed the 4 colors that was predicted. And apparently that white buffalo up in Wisconsin fulfills a prophecy of the Siouan people of the return of White Buffalo Woman and a great change in the ages. And there were Native Americans up there doing prayer when I was there. That buffalo was born to a white couple, the Hyder family, and everybody was pretty gracious about letting people visit and learning about that story and that prophecy. I believe there were 2 other white buffaloes that were born after her, but they didn't live very long. Okay, now there are stories of red-haired giants all over the Americas. The Paiutes, who are out in the west coast of America, have a legend of smoking giant red-haired giants to death in a cave in Nevada. Several mummies were discovered in Lovelock Cave, but many of them have disappeared. Some were even deliberately destroyed. Now, what's interesting is there's a man by the name of Brian Forster who's in Peru right now doing some very good work in Peru to bring to light the vast number of skulls that are elongated and found to have red hair or auburn hair. And there's just a great amount of them all over Peru and various other places. And they have a larger brain capacity, and the skull is elongated. So it is a very different type of being from the past. I know that they were doing some cranial deformation in the Americas as well, the Chinook and the Mayans, but I don't think they were able to achieve the capacity in the skull that some of these skulls have that Brian is finding. So you can check him out. He's out on the web. And hopefully I can get him on as a guest down the road. Okay, so according to the Paiutes, the Psychica, that's what they call them, and this is according to Wikipedia, were a red-haired band of cannibalistic giants. Okay, here we have in Nevada, again, talking about cannibalistic red-haired giants. The Psychica and the Paiute were at war, and after a long struggle, a coalition of tribes trapped the remaining Psychica in Lovelock Cave. When they refused to come out, the Indians piled brush before the cave mouth and set it aflame. The Psychica were annihilated. Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, daughter of Paiute Chief Winnemucca, related many stories about the Psychica in her book, Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims. My people say that the tribe we exterminated had reddish hair. This is her quotes. I have some of their hair, which has been handed down from father to son. I have a dress which has been in our family a great many years, trimmed with the reddish hair. I am going to wear it sometime when I lecture. It is called a mourning dress, and no one has such a dress but my family. Okay, great, nice. The Paiute tradition asserts that the Psychica people practice cannibalism, and this may have had some basis in fact. During the 1924 excavation of the cave, a series of 3 human bones were found near the surface, towards the mouth of the cave. These have been split to extract the marrow as animal bones were split, and probably indicate cannibalism during a famine. Okay. The remains of the Psychica were recovered along with artifacts. Okay, listen to this, and I'm going to read this slowly. A fraternity got a hold of the best adult mummies and burnt them in a bizarre ceremony. Okay. Now, why is a fraternity wanting to do this? Why are we hiding the evidence of this giant red-haired mummy? Let's just be honest, these were the Titans. Okay, this is a group of people that they were deliberately exterminated throughout the world. And anytime you tend to find some of these mummies, they just disappear. And there's no difference between these Titans and the family of Zeus. They come from the same genetics. So, a written report by James H. Hart, the first of 2 miners to excavate the cave in the fall of 1911, recalls that in the north central part of the cave, about 4 feet deep, was a striking-looking body of a man, 6 feet 6 inches tall. His body was mummified and his hair distinctly red. Unfortunately, in the first year of mining, some of the human remains and artifacts were lost and destroyed. The best specimen of the adult mummies was boiled and destroyed by a local fraternal lodge, which wanted the skeleton for initiation purposes. Okay, I've already told you that. After several of the fiber sandals found in the cave were remarkably large, and one reported at over 15 inches in length was said to be on display at the Nevada Historical Society's Museum in Reno in 1952. Okay, it's interesting because all of these skeletons and all of this evidence, it just seems to just keep disappearing. You know, what a coincidence. Okay. Now, we know for a fact that the Vikings came to America around 1000 CE or AD. That's been proven. They tried several times to establish a colony in what they called America, Vinland. They were chased out. And eventually I'll get into Nordic mythology and I'll talk about the travels of the Vikings. Now, they were able to settle Greenland and Iceland, and they have an oral tradition of the other people that they called Skraelings, which means thin and scrawny, trying to bargain for their weapons in Vinland, which is America. When they refused, the others tried to steal the weapons, and warfare broke out. Okay. Now, like I said, I will get into some Nordic mythology and the stories of the gods and Ragnarok and their travels to America in another show. I do want to mention that the Celtic Saint Brendan traveled to America, and his ancestors did years before him, and that was about 1,400 years ago. So there have been travelers from Europe to America for thousands of years, and probably, based on some of the current studies of the Clovis toolkit and pre-Clovis toolkit, it matches Celtic Solutrean. It matches the Celtic Solutrean toolkit, and the Clovis and pre-Clovis predate any of the people we call Native Americans. So, basically, who was the real Native American? I definitely think that there was a race prior to our race, and it was Caucasoid, red and blonde-haired. They had this war. They were wiped out. Whatever was left was reduced to a state of savagery, and there was a differentiation between them and the human, who was smaller and weaker, but more numerous than them. And the other, part of the giants, known as the Olympians, fought them and wanted only their genetics to survive through the humans and whatever's left of them. And basically, all of the giants that were left were hunted down and exterminated, unless they, that genetic was part of the Zeus line or the Chronite line. Okay, now looking at some of the Mesoamerican, many of the Mayan codices were burnt by the wonderful Catholic Church missionaries when they came over, but there appears to be many Aztec codices that survived to tell the tale of the Aztec or Mexica people. A very interesting story about the Aztec people leaving their homeland that they called Aztlan to escape an overbearing ruling elite is shown in the Codex Boturini. Okay. All right. Now, some of the other stories of the Mesoamericans, Quetzalcoatl, also known as Viracocha or Kukulkan or Botan, came around disguised as a beggar to check on humans to see if they were still following his teachings. His son also came around and taught civilization to people. Okay, that sounds like Zeus and Dionysus Osiris again. Spanish chronicle, according to Wikipedia, Spanish chronicles from the 16th century claim that when the conquistadors led by Francisco Pizarro first encountered the Incas, they were greeted as gods, Viracochas, because their lighter skin resembled their god, Viracocha. The story was first reported by Pedro Cieza de Leon and later by Pedro Sarmiento de Gamboa. Similar accounts by Spanish chroniclers describe Viracocha as a white god, often with a beard. The whiteness of Viracocha is, however, not mentioned in the native authentic legends of the Incas, and most modern scholars therefore consider the white god to be post-conquest Spanish invention. Now, sorry, I don't buy that. It was Zeus and Osiris. Similar to the Incan god Viracocha, the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl, and several other deities from Central and South American pantheons, Bochica is described in legends as being bearded. The beard, once believed to be a mark of prehistoric European influence and quickly fueled and embellished by the spirits of colonial era, had its single significance in continentally insular culture of Mesoamerica. Now, remember the pharaoh has to have a beard, and if he doesn't, he gets a fake one over in Egypt. That is the sign of the pharaoh, so keep that in mind as well. Okay. Now, moving over to China, they found the Tarim mummies, and they're tall European people that had lived in the area. Now, according to Wikipedia, the Tarim mummies are a series of mummies discovered in the Tarim Basin in present-day Xinjiang, China, which date from 1900 BC to 200 AD. Some of the mummies are basically associated with the presence of the Indo-European Tocharian languages in the Tarim Basin, although the evidence is not totally conclusive. Research into the subject has attracted controversy due to ethnic tensions in modern-day Xinjiang. Listen, don't you people want the truth? Really? Okay. Stop hiding the truth. There have been concerns whether DNA results could affect claims by Uyghur peoples of being indigenous to the region, and comparing the DNA of the mummies to that of modern-day Uyghur peoples. Victor H. Mayer's team found some genetic similarities with the mummies, but no direct links, stating that modern DNA and ancient DNA show that the Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, the people of the Central Asia are all mixed Caucasian and East Asian. Well, they say Genghis Khan was a white man with red hair. The modern and ancient DNA tell the same story. It concludes that the mummies are basically Caucasoid, likely speakers of an Indo-European language. Okay, now I'm going to bring up one other point. It's interesting to note that the Hawaiians consider their goddess Pele to be a tall white woman with red hair who was killed by a jealous sister and was buried on an island off of Maui. And when I get into some of the Polynesian mythology, I'll talk about that a little bit more. They have stories of the little people and giant cannibals as well, and red-haired gods and goddesses. Very similar to the Osiris, Isis, that story. Now, there have been several mummies and skeletons found that don't fit the mold of what is thought to be a Native American. Here are some of the sites. The Windover Bog mummies in Florida, although there's some talk that isn't the case. Spirit Caveman in Nevada, the Seneca of Lovelock Cave in Nevada, Kennewick Man of Washington State. If you go into some of the older newspaper articles, you will find talk in the 1800s of finding giants all over the Midwest, in Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, and so on. The Princess of Aztlan, I have to question who she was. And red-haired mummies all over Peru. Now, this is a touchy subject as to the true origins of ancient people. And there's a lot to lose. People have gained a lot of political power. They get special privileges such as, I'm just going to say they get special privileges by claiming that they were the indigenous people. And when any of this stuff comes out, we now have NAGPRA, which, immediately a claim is made that this body, ancient mummy or body belongs to a native tribe before any scientific examination can be made. And what I find interesting is that NAGPRA came out in the 1990s, just after the science of DNA testing started to be perfected. And I find it interesting that they don't want things to be DNA tested or examined to find out the truth of who really was native and what was the real story of the human race. Even though all of the mythologies give you a pretty good idea of it, and the extermination of this red hair race all around the world. Okay, what I also find interesting is a fraternity. The fraternity getting hold of those mummies and burning it for an initiation ceremony. I could probably make a pretty good guess what fraternity that was. And they have a say in it too, because of the power of their secret societies that are basically they're all Judeo-based. Let's just call it for what it is. And they can't have that mainstream religion challenged in any way or any of the truth. And, basically coming into America, they didn't care about protecting any of these ancient sites. They didn't care about protecting any of these ancient bones, just as long as the manifest destiny took its place. And now that that's done, now all of a sudden it's a big concern. Even though we have the science to take care of things in a proper way and rebury it, if the DNA proves out what tribe it belongs to. So this is all, in my opinion, politically motivated. Okay. I want to talk about also some of these ancient books. The Dead Sea Scrolls mentions giants. And let's see if I can read a little bit. They talk about Gilgamesh and let's see. I can find something here. Yeah, there's a book of giants in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'll read a little bit about it. Okay, and there's a lot of text missing, so they can only put in what they know. They knew the secrets of blank was great in the earth, and they killed many. They begat giants. Everything that the earth produced, the great fish, the sky, with all that grew, fruit of the earth and all the kinds of grain and all the trees, beasts and reptiles, all creeping things of the earth, and they observed all, every harsh deed and utterance, male and female, and among humans. Okay, they talk about experimenting with the animals and creating hybrids. 200 donkeys, 200 asses, 200 rams of the flock, 200 goats, 200 beasts of field, from every animal, through every bird, for myths and generation. Okay, so here's some scientific description of genetic engineering, making hybrids. Okay, they defiled, they begot giants and monsters. They begot, and behold, all the earth was corrupted with its blood and by the hand of giants, which did not suffice for them, and they were seeking to devour many. The monsters attacked. Okay, I'm going to continue a little bit. There are two giants, Oya and Ha, and those two giants are speaking to Enoch, and they're concerned about the destruction that's coming. I am a giant, and by the mighty strength of my arm and my own great strength, anyone mortal and I have made war against them, but I am not able to stand against them, for my opponents reside in heaven, and they dwell in holy places. And not that they are stronger than I, of the wild beast is come, and the wild man they call me. Then Oya said to him, I have been forced to have a dream. The sleep of my eyes vanished to let me see a vision. Now I know that blank Gilgamesh. Okay, three of its roots, while I was watching, there came and moved the roots into this garden of them and not. Okay, there's a lot of this missing. Concerns the death of our souls and all his comrades. And Oya told them what Gilgamesh said to him. And Gilgamesh is from Sumerian mythology. I'll talk about that in another show. And it was said concerning blank, the leader has cursed the potentates, and the giants were glad at his words. Then he turned and left. Okay, this is basically, this book of giants is talking about they had dreams. They knew they were going to be killed by the great flood, and that was in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Another book called the Pseudepigrapha is a book about, it's a book of text that never made it into the Bible. And in 3 Baruch, they specifically talk about these giants. Okay, and I, Baruch, said, and since the vine became the cause of such evil and was cursed by God and was the destruction of the firstborn, how it is now of such great use. And the angel said, rightly you ask, when God caused the flood over the earth and destroyed all flesh, and 409,000 giants, that's almost 500,000 giants, and the water rose over the heights 15 cubits, the water entered paradise and killed every flower, but removed the sprig of the vine completely and brought it outside. And when the earth appeared from the water and Noah left the ark, he started a plant of the discovered plants. He also found the sprig, and taking it, he considered in mind what it was. And I came, and I told him. And he said, should I plant it, or what should I do with it? Since Adam was destroyed by means of it, will I encounter the anger of God through this? And while saying these things, he prayed for God to reveal to him what he should do with this. And he knelt down on his knees and fasted 40 days, praying and crying. He said, Lord, if I plant this, what will happen? And the Lord sent the angel Sarasael. He declared to him, rise, Noah, and plant the vine and alter its name and change it for the better. But beware, Baruch, the tree still possesses evil. Okay, that vine is a wine vine, or grapevine. Let me read the rest of this. Those who drink wine in excess do all evil. Brother does not show mercy to brother, nor father to son, nor son to father. And from evil all wine comes forth murder and adultery, fornication and cursing, as much evil as exists because of wine. So, and I want to read before that, okay, the vine, this is interesting. And I said, I pray you, show me which is the tree which caused Adam to stray. And the angel said, it is the vine which the angel Samael planted, by which the Lord God became angered, and he cursed him in his planting. Okay, he, for this reason, he did not permit Adam to touch it. And because of this, the devil became envious and tricked him by means of his vine. Well, Samael, I believe, is another name for Zeus. Even though Dionysus discovered how to make wine, basically, Zeus and his sister were making alcoholic beverages from the wheat products before that. But that's interesting. Almost 500,000. That book cites almost 500,000 giants. Okay, so now, in New Zealand, they also have stories of pale-skinned giants that they call fairy people. And they even created a stamp showing a somewhat albino being as being the New Zealand fairy. Okay, so there you have it. I have shown you that the story of these these red-haired, blonde, auburn-haired giants is global. It's ancient. It's in mythologies all over the place, and even in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Pseudepigrapha. There has been evidence of these over 6 feet tall Caucasoids from North America to China. It is a touchy subject. Oftentimes, those remains disappear or are destroyed. And, if you talk about this, people laugh at you and think you're nuts. But go to Brian Foster's site. He's got all kind of pictures of these red-haired, elongated skulls. And who knows how long those are going to last before someone goes in there and destroys it. But, there's all kind of written evidence and written testaments and newspaper articles and pictures. And there's actually still a few elongated skulls from that Lovelock cave floating around. We don't know what happened to the full, mummies that were in there. But they're, the shoes and some of the other artifacts, they're still floating around in some of the museums out in Nevada. And there's probably still more of these giants yet to be found. But, basically, I definitely believe there was a previous race, a Caucasoid race, and there was a distinction between this race and the average human. And as I get into some of the other mythologies, this previous race claims to have created the human. But this previous race had a terrible war, as I've described in the last several shows, and destroyed their advanced civilization. Where they came from is another story in itself. That's quite different as well, which I'll get into in a later show. But basically, they had a war and reduced themselves to a savage and cannibalistic state, and some of their people restarted civilization. But unfortunately, those people known as the gods and goddesses of old, or the Olympians, made it their point to exterminate the others of their kind and to have the humans exterminate them. And this is a subject that is very politically charged, but it has to be looked at because it's part of the hidden human story. Okay, and as I said, what I've done in my writings, my work, my research is completely original. I've shown you the writings that describe the global travels of Dionysus Osiris with his many names, Redhorn, Quetzalcoatl, the Birdman, Balder, Angus, and many other names, and his father Zeus, who is also Odin, and Dagda, and Viracocha, and Hare, and all of his names. Basically, I've given you the sources that tell you of his global travels and how they created the platform for the mythologies around the world. And that's why everything is very similar. Nobody that I know of has done this. So you have heard it here first. And if anybody starts telling you this, then they took it from my show, because it took me years and a whole lot of reading and a whole lot of study and a whole lot of thinking to figure this out and start finding the proof in the writings and the ancient mythologies and the similarities of it. So this is something to think about. And as I continue on with these shows, we'll look at some more mythologies around the world and show you how all of it fits into this puzzle. Now, as I said before, I've written some children's books, www.thelibrarykids.com, that go through mythologies around the world. Adults like it too. You can get some of those books. I've written 3 books in my Hidden Human Story series that is available. I have 2 blogs, hiddenhumanstory.blogspot.com and ritagmoran.blogspot.com. I have a Facebook page you can look at. It's nice to kind of go and look at those pages because I put a lot of pictures out there or photographs from places that I go out and research, not just stuff that I might find as public domain from Wikipedia. But I actually go out and do some research at some of these sites when I can and find something, unique and take as many pictures as I can to show you some of this graphically as well. So it's worth your time to go out and take a look at those sites. You could also subscribe to this radio channel if you haven't, or radio show if you haven't already. And I think that's about it for today. So until the next time that we meet, take care.